Hi, welcome and all. This is Ken from Narcissus Florals here to demonstrate a proper wristlet and boutonniere. We're going to make today a complementary wristlet and boutonniere, meaning that they are going to be both made of yellow spray roses. Spray roses are the most popular bloom used for our wristlets. However, you can use complementing flowers like roses and orchids. To start with the spray rose, you're going to first cut the stem short on the bloom and then take a hair wire, never a 23 gauge wire, and place it simply through the top of the stem but beneath the bloom of the flower all the way through. Bend it down. The one side is longer than the other. Then you're going to take your floral tape. We are all aware of the situation with the floral tape. Presently, we're working on finding a better solution with regard to the quality, but the wider tape is not fraying as easily as the narrow tape. So that is how you tape it all the way down the stem. Notice that the wire is clean and smooth. We're going to repeat that process 7 times. 7 is the proper count for our wristlets, a traditional size wristlet. If you're doing a smaller wristlet for a young lady or a daddy-daughter dance, typically that's 3 to 4 blooms. We're going to remove all of the guard petals. Guard petals get damaged in transit. They are intended to be removed, so please only use the best blooms that are available. Again, we're going through the highest part of the stem of the rose beneath the head of the bloom. We're working our way down the stem. Notice you don't need to add any accent or filler blooms while you are doing this process. And please make sure that that stem on your flower itself is no longer than the head of the bloom that you are using. The reason why we're doing that is because if you use too much of the stem, the end product gets too thick. So you want the end product to be all hair wires, which is going to be significantly easier for assembly. All right, we're now doing the 5th one here. So your 5th wired rose, and then we're going to add to our wristlet and boutonniere some baby's breath and some gun-eye eucalyptus as our accents. Of course, that can be ruscus. It's a little more difficult with lemon leaf, being that that's a broad leaf. If ever you use lemon leaf, please make sure we're using the smallest of the foliage that's available. And then, of course, we want to make our 7th rose here. We are just going to create a wristlet with these yellow roses and a sage tone ribbon. So I'm going to demonstrate the proper size of a bow for a wristlet as well. Typically, you want to have your bow to have 4 to 5 loops if you're using a traditional number 9 double satin. So that's 2 loops and back to the middle. You can see when you're making a wristlet bow, the ribbon itself, the loops of the ribbon are tight, so you get that beautiful image here of that pulled ribbon. You can then take a full hair wire, bend it in half, come back through the center of the ribbon itself of the bow, and then you pull it tight so that it sits up really beautifully for you. And then you simply trim up the tails. Leave them a little longer at this point because you are likely going to have to trim them up further once you are assembling the wristlet. Proper assembly of a wristlet is going to be 4 blooms on top, 3 blooms on the bottom. Because the wristlet was made with a short stem on the rose and a longer stem for the wire, they are very malleable, so you can easily manipulate the blooms themselves. Here I'm incorporating the baby's breath between the flowers, so just taking a little bit of the bloom off of the fuller stem of baby's breath. Notice we don't have any foliage beneath my thumb, all right? That's going to also allow for a very clean, easy to assemble wristlet. We're then going to add a little bit more of the gun-eye eucalyptus, and we have for ourselves what is the top part of the wristlet here. We then take the tape where you've been holding the wristlet between your thumb and index finger, and you're simply tacking it in place, twisting it all the way down, and a nice clean finish. You then take the ribbon and the wand that you've made into a bow, and you are going to place that beneath that last rose, come around the back, twist it, and pull the wire down. At this point, you take the tape and you come around that wire so the wire itself is no longer exposed. You pull the tape all the way down. At this point, you're going to add the blooms to the bottom. What you're doing to add a bloom to the bottom is you're simply bending the bloom backwards and placing it up against the ribbon. bend the bloom backwards, up against the ribbon, bend the bloom backwards, up against the ribbon. You can then manipulate these blooms very easily. Add in your gunai eucalyptus. All right, couple of stems. And then, of course, your foliage or accent of choice, in this case, again, the baby's breath. Just a little bit more of that gunai eucalyptus there so that you've enrobed the roses, right? So you're all the way around. At this point, because you've bent those blooms backwards, you're taking your wire again, coming up between your thumb and index finger, and simply tacking the wire back and pulling it down again. So this wire is holding these blooms, right, and your accents together. You can trim up the rest of these stems a little bit because we're going to wrap this one more time. Now this double-sized floral wrap does create a little bit of a thicker stem than even the narrower 1/4 inch. But you'll see when we're finished that even this is clean and easy enough to hide. So in order to put the wristlet band on, you're above the bow, right? You're going to make that tight, and then just below the bow, you're going to use the needle nose pliers to crimp that. You're then going to take your wristlet band around the top of the bow, where the bow is, that you've just crimped. And with your fingers, you're going to pinch in the tops. And with your fingers on beneath the bow, you're going to pinch in the bottom. Now it's the time for the needle nose pliers to simply crimp that, both top and bottom. All right. We're going to take our shears. We're going to clip off the bottom of the wristlet. We're going to pull it up toward the wristlet itself where it's clamped. We're going to clamp that again. And then we're going to come around it one last time to finish that off so you don't have any of the metal exposed. And that is a brief demonstration on how to make a proper wristlet that's going to hold on tight and last all night long.